Earlier in this course, we have seen that sometimes when you execute queries, errors are thrown, and these errors may be syntactical or runtime. In this module, you will learn how to handle errors using the try-catch blocks and how to gather detailed information about runtime errors. Although this module does not go into details of error handling, it will introduce you to the error handling methods available in SQL Server 2012. Earlier in this course, you learned that some errors, such as the syntax errors, will prevent a batch of T-SQL statements from executing. However, many runtime errors will allow execution to continue to the next line in a batch. To control this behavior, you can add structured exception handling to your code in the form of a try-catch block. They will allow you to redirect failed executions to your custom error handling code and prevent unanticipated problems from code that returns an error but continues to execute. In this lesson, you will learn the structured exception handling support in SQL Server and how to create try and catch blocks in T-SQL code. First, let's see what structured exception handling is. An exception is an event that occurs during the execution of a program and requires the execution of code outside the normal flow of control. There are two kinds of exceptions: hardware exceptions and software exceptions. Hardware exceptions are initiated by the CPU. They can result from the execution of certain instruction sequences, such as division by zero or an attempt to access an invalid memory address. Software exceptions are initiated explicitly by the applications or the operating system. For example, the system can detect when an invalid parameter value is specified. Structured exception handling is a mechanism for handling both hardware and software exceptions. SQL Server 2005 introduced support for structured exception handling, which is a feature of many modern programming languages such as those with the .NET framework. Unlike simple error checking, structured exception handling allows the program flow to be transferred to another section of code when an error is detected. This way, you can create centralized error handling routines to be used in procedures. SQL Server supports several ways of checking for and handling runtime errors in your code. Previous versions of SQL Server use the system function called error, which would return a non-zero value if queried immediately after an error occurred. However, this was problematic and required checking for an error after each operation. To implement structured exception handling, SQL Server provides support for protected blocks of code between begin try and end try statements. The try-catch statement in Transact SQL allows you to detect and handle error conditions gracefully within your database applications. This statement is the cornerstone of SQL Server error handling and is an extremely important part of developing robust database applications. If a runtime error occurs within a try block, execution is transferred to a block of code that is in between begin catch and end catch statements. And the begin catch statement must immediately follow the end try statement. The catch block executes code that can inspect the error, manage transactions, and return information about the error to the client. It is important to note that structured exception handling operates on errors during runtime only. Syntax and compilation errors that prevent a batch from starting cannot be handled by a try-catch block at the same level. Now let's see how to create the try and catch blocks. The try-catch construct is very similar to the exception handling features of Microsoft Visual C++ and Microsoft Visual C# languages. A try-catch construct consists of two parts, a try block and a catch block. The block that contains the T-SQL statements that carry out the core functionality of your procedure, such as inserting or updating tables, is the try block. And a try block is marked with begin try and end try statements. When an error condition is detected in the Transact SQL statement that is inside a try block, control is passed to the catch block where the error can be processed. A try block must be immediately followed by a catch block. There should be no code that is placed between end try and begin catch statements. And you need to place all the code that might raise an error between the begin try and end try statements. You can also nest the try and catch blocks. The catch block is defined by begin catch and end catch statements, and the execution is moved to the catch block when there is an error that occurred in the try block. After the catch block handles the exception, control is then transferred to the first Transact SQL statement that follows the end catch statement. And if the end catch statement is the last statement in a stored procedure or trigger, control is returned to the code that invoked the stored procedure or trigger. Transact SQL statements in the try block following the statement that generates an error will not be executed. Let's look at an example to see how the try and catch blocks work. In this example here, execution begins with line 1, which starts the try block. It continues until an error occurs in the select statement. Then the execution is redirected to the begin catch statement, and it enters the catch block. Any code in the catch block is executed, and the catch block ends with the end catch statement. Any code that follows the catch block is then executed. Let's execute this example and see what the results will look like. Let's open a new query and paste the query that we just saw. And let's say print error if there is an error. Let's click on execute. Let's first select Transact SQL 2012 database. Click on execute. And it returns the word error, which is in the catch block. Let's add another select statement in the try block, which is a valid statement. Let's click on execute to see if that second statement will get executed. Click on execute, and it shows that the second select statement hasn't been executed. This shows that the Transact SQL statements in the try block following the statement that generates an error will not be executed. Let's change this select statement to a valid one. Let's click on execute, and it executes both the select statements. Let's add another statement after the catch block, and let's remove this select statement, and let's change it back so that that select will generate an error. Let's click on execute. When you go to messages, it printed the statement following the catch block. So far in this module, you've learned how to use the try and catch blocks to handle errors. In the next lesson, you will learn how to work with those errors that are thrown in SQL.